Not Quite Right features discussions that are unfiltered and uncensored and may include themes that are inappropriate for younger listeners. Also, I swear a lot.
Something doesn't seem quite right.
Welcome to Not Quite Right. My name's Ed.
And I'm Amanda.
This is the first of our Daredevil episodes for the January prize.
And I know our listeners love these episodes because basically they come at the expense of the Daredevil, literally and figuratively. But everyone else gets the benefit of hiding behind their stories and looking at maybe some of the things they did too that they could do better or differently.
It's a learning experience for us all. And we've said this before, that judging this competition for us has been the biggest learning experience about flash fiction and writing in general. So this is one of the ways that we hope to kind of share that experience with all of you. So in this episode, in all of our Daredevil episodes, we will read out the story and we will talk about it. We'll break it down, say what we liked, what we didn't like, what we think can be improved. And if you want to become a Daredevil, head over to the website and you can sign up on the prize page. I think there are still a couple of available slots for the April prize as of the time of recording this episode. And the prompts for this round, for the January round, were the word prompt. You needed to use the word ring. The action prompt was opening a door. And the anti-prompt this round was break the rule, write what you know. Our first cab off the rank for this round is Dez Veares. And Dez has actually featured as a Daredevil in the past. He was with us for the July round where we read his story, Dazzling Diamonds, Heroic Horses and Pink Panties.
He's a sucker for punishment. He's back again.
He is. Yes, there's a few people who are back for seconds or thirds, as the case may be.
And Dez's story this round is called COVID-28, Case Study LS0977/B, The Impact of the Open Door Program on Infected Females Displaying Hysteria. In my experience, smaller dicked men try harder. But on the morning of our first anniversary, it's my varnished fingernails that finish the job, as Simon grunts and dribbles on my breasts, croaking, "You are so hot, baby." As he showers, my mother ruins a Brad Pitt reverie. I've been meaning to change my number for weeks. "Louise, sweetheart, fancy lunch at Walk My Way? Some quality mother-daughter time would be so nice, don't you think?" There's an audible adjustment of dentures. Then she attempts a more forceful tone. "And we could have a chat about the Open Door Program?" "Fuck off, mother." "Now, Louise, I'm not going to be cross with you because I know it's the virus talking. It's a nasty infection for us girls, which is why the Open Door..." My phone relocates to the toilet with a satisfying splosh. "Simon, you disgust me. You've left smears of shit in the fucking toilet again." He waddles into the bathroom like a startled penguin. "Louise, baby, okay, I'll sort that. But please try to be more ladylike. That language isn't very pretty. Now, I understand it's a viral infection, so..." To be fair to me, I do try to use ladylike language as I advise him that I'm leaving him, that I can no longer pretend I love him, or even like him much, that he is pathetic in bed and that he has the professional aspirations of a dead cat, and that I am not going through the fucking open door treatment just because it suits men. Don't be a silly girl, it's just 5 days in a lovely clinic, and then the nasty virus goes away and our lovely Louise comes back. You'll be a proper woman again. Or maybe I prefer this version of womanhood. Maybe this virus is what the world has been waiting for. Now don't make me angry, darling. You'll feel so much better. Better? Better for who? I do indeed feel much better as a glass ashtray smashes against costly dental work. Crimson blood spurts onto his precious laptop and yellow urine cascades down his podgy, hairless legs. His flabby pink hands fill my vision. And then it is black. I'm squinting. It's too bright. It's too white. I can't see. What's that? It's a smiling man. He's cute too. "Hello, Louise. I'm Dr. James Jenner. How are you feeling?" Then it hits me. Of course, I know about forced door openings. They started the day after a woman assassinated Trump. What have you done to me? Well, that's what's interesting, Louise. Nothing. We've cleaned up your injuries. Your husband told us about your accident, but there are no antibodies in your blood. You do not have the virus, and you've never had it. We're all rather puzzled. 11 other women will puzzle doctors that month, 49 the following, and 2,000 the next. But it's COVID-33 that will bring real change for women.
And Dez has actually left us a voice message. So we'll listen to that now.
Hi, Amanda and Ed. This is Dez in London. So I'm really looking forward to the Daredevil podcast. I'm hoping my humiliation will be as helpful to other writers as the last one was for me. So on this occasion, I set myself 2 challenges for this entry. I wanted to write about a serious societal issue, in this case, coercive control of women, but I wanted to write it with humour, but without it turning into a cartoon. So maybe I failed on that one. And secondly, I wanted to present a strong, driven woman without falling into the trap of having her behave like a man, which I know male writers are wont to do on occasion. Anyway, can't wait to be roasted. I trust you entirely. Thanks for everything you do. And yeah, looking forward to it. Bye.
So thanks, Dez. And so as we know this round, the anti-prompt is very personal. So we asked people to leave comments in the brief explanation field to explain what they were doing. Mm-hmm. So Dez has left the comment, I don't know anything about future pandemics. I don't have the lived experience of a woman experiencing coercive control from a man, but I know many women who do. Hope this fits the anti-prompt. Mm. So maybe let's start there. What do you think about how Dez has portrayed this experience?
To be honest, that was something that I struggled with a little bit reading this story because when I got to that comment, that's not really how I read this. This character doesn't come across as a woman who's experiencing coercive control. If anything, she's the aggressor in this relationship. And so I guess that didn't really click for me. I didn't really see how that came out in the story itself. I do think that's a very powerful topic to write about, and it's one that we read about a fair bit in the comp, whether it's coercive control or domestic violence or what have you. But yeah, in my mind, it was the other way around here. She's the one who smashes his head with an ashtray and breaks his teeth.
Well, yeah, there is violence coming from both sides here. And clearly he's trying to get her to take this treatment. Right?
Well, you say violence from both sides. Where's the violence on his side?
Well, there's the fade to black.
Yeah, right.
And the hands coming into view. So it's implied violence. But for her, there's explicit violence as well. So, and maybe we can get into the detail there about how, if that's the starting point, wanting to portray that experience, how you can more completely funnel that experience into something that resonates.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's challenging because you want a character who has agency, right? We say that a lot. So giving a character agency means giving them power within the scene to act and to change things that happen in the scene. And so someone who's experiencing coercive control, that usually requires them breaking out of that control. So that is something that you might want to show within a scene. But I guess you need to establish first very clearly the control part. What are they up against? And I'm not sure that is established here. This woman seems pretty sure of herself while the people around her are trying to talk her into this open door program. So far, she's been completely able to stop that from happening.
Yeah, she doesn't seem to exhibit the fear element of the relationship. She's very forthcoming with her opinions and she doesn't seem to worry about any repercussions.
And I'm not sure that matters from a story perspective, because had it not been for that brief description, that just wouldn't have even been something that entered my mind. So it's not like it was a problem within the story itself. It was more just a disconnect in my mind between the story that was presented and then Dez's intention there. So just with the title, I mean, it was one of the longer titles. Didn't quite get that longest title gong this round. But something interesting about that is that it implies a hermit crab fiction, because we've got here, it's a case study. COVID-28 case study LS0977/B, the impact of the open door program, etc. But the story that follows is...
It's not a case study.
It's not a case study. It's a narrative. And so I don't quite know how to feel about that. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a bait and switch. You've set us up to expect a hermit crab and then it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of relieved that it's not because, you know, I don't love hermit crab fiction in general. But I think as a general rule, like you probably should be thinking about how your title sets up what's to come and links to and recalls back what's to come in that story. So while there's nothing, in my view, wrong with this title, I'm not sure that it matches the story that follows. Yeah. Now, we know that I'm not exactly the queen of giving things good titles, so I'm kind of just climb down off my high horse for a second. But I do think it's worth thinking about. And I don't think by any means that impacts like how your story's received, really. But it's just another opportunity to sort of hone the message, I guess, that you're putting out there.
I guess what the title does do effectively is give you information that is not really given in the story, which is the fact that it's set in 2028, like near
that's
future.
True. So you are going into it with some knowledge that...
Yeah, but like you said, I mean, if you remove those words, case study LS0977B, then you can still have a similar title without setting up that expectation.
That's true. I just wanted to talk about some things that Dez has done well in this story because we're just going to probably go into a whole bunch of critique. Like, let's talk about some of the good stuff. So one of the things, which we'll get into in a sec with that first line, but I just love how much fun Dez has with this stuff. Like all of his stories, when they come through, like there's something a bit edgy, something a bit dark, but also light. And, you know, that appeals to me massively. And I do love to get Dez's stories. And when this came back under his name, I wasn't surprised. You know, it's like, okay, this is fun, but also, dark. So I think that's a good angle for a piece of flash fiction. So well done.
Yeah, and I'll also say that I enjoyed how active this was and kind of grounded in the action and didn't get too deep inside the characters' heads, and it was very much what was happening in the here and now.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same notes because I think in Dez's past stories, and he's had a Daredevil before, but we've also done a critique on one of Dez's stories, and backstory was a little bit clunky there in past ones, and it's not here. Like, we're set up, they're on their first anniversary. We know they've been together for a year. Like, that's handled like instantly. We're not sort of jumping out of the scene to get back into how they met or, you know, the history of their relationship. We're just moving forward. And I think that's a really good choice. And like you, I did think that there was plenty of action here. Another thing that we had was like a very clear beginning, middle and end to this story, which sounds basic, but it's actually something that was missing in a lot of stories. We mentioned in the long list episode how a lot of stories really felt more of a lead up or an opening and didn't really deliver that climax, whereas this one really did. So I think that's a real strength here as well. So having said that, let's get into let's go through. Let's look at the story bit by bit.
Okay. So the opening of the story, in my experience, smaller dicked men try harder. But on the morning of our first anniversary, it's my varnished fingernails that finish the job. As Simon grunts and dribbles on my breasts, croaking, "You're so hot, baby."
We called that one out as a favourite line.
Yeah,
in the long list episode.
It's attention grabbing. It's a good scene opener. It throws you into the action, I would say.
And it establishes conflict right up front. So we've got two characters and we've also got setting, I guess. They're in the bedroom, you assume, and we've got conflict between them. So a lot of that stuff's been established very quickly while also doing so in a hooking way. So that's a huge tick. That's a really great opening for a story. Yeah.
One thing I would call out as a minor, I'm not sure if you got this in your notes as well, but my varnished fingernails finish the job. Would you use your fingernails to finish the job? That sounds like it would be a bit painful, so I'm not sure if that's what you meant.
That's actually a good point. That hadn't occurred to me. Yeah.
But also I think it's an opportunity to establish character and to say something about your character, right? So when you're writing from a perspective here, and this is a direct perspective, it's a first-person present tense story. So what would your character notice about that situation? And some of the things that you've noted are great, like the grunts and the dribbles and that kind of thing. The varnished fingernails, I don't know if it's something that character would notice about themselves in that moment. I think
that's a fair comment. I do think in this case it sort of slips by fairly unnoticed. Like, it's painting a picture, so that's good. It's giving us a visual to latch onto. Yeah. But for sure, like, you could make that visual more relevant. Like, realistically, she's looking at him probably at that point and being disgusted. And that is portrayed here, but you could further that. Yeah. And because the scene isn't actually technically set in terms of like, where are we, what room are we in, that sort of thing, like that can be implied. And in this case, I don't necessarily think that You need to do a lot of scene setting. It's a pretty sort of familiar kind of scene. The reader can fill in the blanks. However, having said that, it doesn't hurt to give your reader a visual with some relevant details. So it's possible to bring in elements of the scene into the opening as well. Like, what other objects are in the room, or where are we? Is it a bedroom? Are they on a bed? Are they somewhere else? What does that tell us about this relationship? You know, maybe the relationship's getting stale already at 1 year. Like, how can you use the setting to kind of convey that as well? So that's an option available to you. I didn't miss it here. I didn't feel like I couldn't picture what was going on. But I think as a rule of thumb, you probably kind of want to get your characters and your setting and that conflict all together in that opening. So that, you know, if we think of this from a cinematic point of view, like, what is the reader actually picturing? Giving them something to picture.
Okay, so we go to the next line, and again, I'll call this out as a small point, as an opportunity, I think, more than a criticism. As he showers, my mother ruins a Brad Pitt reverie. I've been meaning to change my number for weeks. So you've used Brad Pitt there as like an example of someone that she's fantasized about. I think you can be a little bit more creative, because Brad Pitt is a bit predictable as an object. And I think
he's also a bit problematic these days as well. I'm not
well,
sure that
everyone
he's
is
quite so.
over the age
true.
of 40.
On that note, by the way, if she is the kind of character who is experiencing coercive control or whatever, like, you've got a type, clearly, if you're fantasizing about Brad Pitt. But anyway, that's
maybe that was the
note.
intention. My view was like, you can develop character by choosing something a little bit more specific and individual. Brad Pitt strikes me as being a little bit cliche, a little bit predictable, like, oh, all women love Brad Pitt. Maybe like you could go someone a little bit out of left field.
Oh, yeah?
I wouldn't go so far as to suggest Timothée Chalamet, but, you know, someone a little bit more obscure that might at least reveal something about that character that she's into a certain type of man.
What is she looking for that Simon doesn't offer?
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
Of thing. Yeah,
yeah,
like
and then
the contrast.
Contrast that with him as well. Yes, absolutely.
I would say too, just on that line, and this is more of a technical thing, but as he showers, my mother ruins a Brad Pitt reverie. I would just say that sentence could do with a slight rephrase. I think as you're reading it, it's a bit of a stumbler.
Because it happens in the reverse order.
It happens in reverse order, but also we've got 3 characters here all lumped into a very short bit. So put him in the shower first, just let that happen. Like, he goes off to a shower, and then you need to think about Brad Pitt before your mother interrupts that thought. And, you know, it seems like such a minor thing, but when you're reading this stuff, putting things in their logical order actually helps the reader to just have that smooth reading experience where they don't go, hang on, what? You know, and I did. For that sentence, I was like, hang on, and you have to take that little second to figure out what's happening. And I think we just want to avoid that wherever we can.
All right. And the second half of that line is, I've been meaning to change my number for weeks. And obviously that's a striking moment, like when your mother's calling, but you're regretting not having changed your number. And it's obviously not because she was dreaming of Brad Pitt in that moment. She's been planning to do it for weeks. So you're setting up this situation where she's gone crazy with this virus.
I found that part more relatable. Like, we've got, not the hating my mother part, definitely not. Hi, Mum. But no, just this idea of, look, she sounds perimenopausal, honestly, is what she sounds like. Like, everything's pissing her off. People are being like, are you okay? Like, maybe we can just help you out. And she's like, no, fuck off. Like,
yeah. It's very direct.
Yeah, pretty direct. And I think for a lot of women, you do hit that point in your life where you're just like, listen, this is the truth that I'm speaking here. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. The problem is with all of you. Like, that attitude is definitely relatable. And anyone in my position, I think, would probably agree with that. You just get to a point where you're like sick of the bullshit. You're sick of being a people pleaser. And you get to a point in your life where you're just like, you know what? No, I'm not putting up with this shit anymore. Mum, stop telling me what to do. Husband or boyfriend or whatever he is, like, you're useless. Like, come on, everyone lift your game kind of thing. I think that's the character that we've got established here, which is why I guess I felt that disconnect with this idea of coercive control.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel like she was controlled. I felt more like maybe she'd been controlling herself her whole life. And finally she's like, nah, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to just be honest now.
Okay, so then we move into the discussion with her mother, and she does mention that open door program there.
Yeah, I thought that was a really fun take on the action prompt, unique take, using that as the inspiration for this whole like plot, really.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a big tick, really. Like, it stands out, this story, as being quite different to a lot of the others where a literal door was just being opened, in many cases for no real reason. In this case, it's like the whole crux of like what's going on here. Now, as far as like how open door relates to this concept of tidying up her attitude or whatever it is, making her more ladylike, I'm not sure that I got the direct connection between opening a door and like making someone more compliant.
Yeah, I think it would have been nice to have just a tiny bit more detail to understand, because we're dealing with a virus here as well. So it's not as the story says it's not a behavioral problem that you would have like an open door program, as it might be a code word for basically controlling women. It's a viral infection that they're dealing with. So there'd be like a vaccine or a treatment of some sort. So, yeah, it's not clear
Just
what that connection...
slapping them around a bit. These hysterical women.
Yeah, so I would have liked to know just a little bit more, like, what does that mean? Like, what is that? They're opening a door in their mind or something? Is it like an invasive procedure or... I
agree. I feel like we needed even just a line or two about what is this procedure, and it needed to be alarming, I guess. Like we've got that sort of Handmaid's Tale world that's being built, but we don't understand how it sort of works. Yeah. And she is supposedly like infected, but not really under an imminent threat. People are just gently suggesting that she go and get this procedure, whatever it may be. Yeah. So I think to ramp up the stakes, it would have been nice to see that that was quite an invasive procedure, that was something that should be feared, and that was something that like you definitely don't want to have done to you. And by making that really clear, I think we would be able to empathise a little bit more with her extreme reactions later on. Because it's almost like the mum suggesting like, oh, just go have a nice break. You know what I mean? And we needed the contrast of what's mum actually talking about when she sort of says, go have a lovely break kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think Dez here is trying to put forward like there's this dystopian, sinister view of it. Like, oh, yeah, and just go have a nice weekend away and it'll all be fixed for you. But we don't get that sinister part of it come through. Yeah. And I think you need to really drive that home.
It's implied, but I think it needs to be stated. Yeah.
All right. So then there's the conversation with her mother. Now, Louise, I'm not going to be cross with you because I know it's the virus talking. It's a nasty infection for us girls, which is why the open door, my phone relocates to the toilet with a satisfying splosh. This is something that I think happens a couple of times in this story where you've got a critical piece of action that is highly dramatic, which is that she hurls her phone across the room into the toilet, and it's stated in a very passive way. So my phone relocates to the toilet. It's very passive. There's no one putting it there. It's relocating. And I think you could really amplify the drama by showing her actually throwing the phone.
I think we needed to see it because to me, and maybe it's just because I'm addicted to my phone, but that is very extreme behaviour. Yeah. To throw your phone in a toilet, you could not make me do that. Yeah. No one calling would make me throw my phone in the toilet. I might angrily stab the end call button, but that's very, very extreme behaviour. So I think we needed a little bit more to understand, like, why is she behaving in such an extremely, quite aggressive way in response to someone pretty much gently being like, let's have lunch. And you know what, sweetie, this would be really good for you. Like, sure, like, butt out, mum. But throwing your phone in a toilet is quite extreme. And I think the action needs to match like the drama of how it's presented. Otherwise, again, there's this emotional disconnect for the reader of like, did I just read what I thought I read? She chucked her phone in the toilet, but like, I don't know how to feel about that because I'm not seeing how she feels about that kind of thing.
You don't actually see the action, you just see the aftermath almost. And then she's in the toilet and she's calling out, you know, you've left smears of shit in the fucking toilet again. So she's like a cannonball here. She's like a bull in the china shop type situation. So I'm not sure how I feel about her as a character at this point. You know, I don't feel like she's that sympathetic, really.
No, I agree. And I think like it escalates, right? Like, and we'll get to the section where she smashes his face in with an ashtray. But again, like how am I supposed to feel about that? Like if this is Handmaid's Tale-esque, like she's the character whose side we want to be on. But then she is being hysterical. Like I say this as a woman who would be horrified to have that said about me. But like if I was chucking my phone in the toilet, smashing someone's face in with an ashtray without really like a clear and present danger, that's extreme behavior.
Yeah.
And I'm like, maybe she does need to be locked up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it starts to confuse, I guess, our reception of that story of like, well, whose side are we on here?
Well, in the very next line, Simon comes in and says something that might shine a little bit of light on that. He says, Louise, baby, okay, I'll sort that out, but please try to be more ladylike. That language isn't very pretty.
Ew.
So how would you respond if your husband told you to be a bit more ladylike?
He wouldn't dare. Again, like, I'm not sure that Simon in that moment is hateable enough. Like, it's an annoying thing to say, but it's not like an enraging thing to say.
I mean, that character just feels like oblivious. Like, why would you say that?
Yeah, it does.
In response to that, to a situation where someone is clearly very angry at something.
I would say in general, like, I found the dialogue felt a little bit inauthentic at times, and so a little bit unrealistic or forced. So we've got her saying, fuck off, mother, like when she first responds to her mother. Like, again, quite an extreme response to what her mother's saying. And then, like, Louise, baby, okay, I'll sort that out. Like, I'm just not feeling that real person saying that. It's fun banter, don't get me wrong, but I'd love to get more of a sense of two real people having it out.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get that here. I think sometimes what flows when you're writing, when you look back at it as a piece of dialogue and imagine someone saying it, sometimes it's a little bit awkward. Even just like as simple at times of like a contraction. Like if you say it is, well, most people don't bother to say it is. They would probably say it's, and so you would only say it is like on rare occasions to make sort of a point. And I mean, that's just one example, but I think here, like, please try to be more ladylike. I'm just not feeling that as something natural that a youngish couple would say to each other.
And I think part of it is as well that we are struggling with these characters, like trying to get to the bottom of them. For our main character, like what's driving her to these extreme reactions, we find out that it's not the virus. So what is it? And we can sympathize with some level of this kind of behavior, but at some point we're like, well, she needs a motivation. Like you said, even an angry, disgruntled person needs an extraordinary reason to throw her phone in the toilet.
Yeah.
And for him, like what's motivating him that he's focused on like how ladylike my wife is in this moment. It's not clear to us, I guess, who these characters are. And I think maybe the dialogue is part of making that more clear.
Yeah, the dialogue's an opportunity to reveal character in what they say, what they don't say, the way they interact with each other. But because I guess there's not, in my view, that natural reaction and like action and reaction between them, it makes it hard to get that handle on who they are and how they relate to each other normally. Like, is this abnormal behaviour for her or not?
Yeah.
We don't even know because that's not ever really sort of said. Simon doesn't react with any kind of shock at what she's saying. He's just kind of like, oh, that's not very ladylike. Like, I think you're right. I think we're just struggling a little bit to get a handle on the characters.
So in the next line, the narrator says, to be fair to me, I do try to use ladylike language as I advise him that I'm leaving him, and then gives a couple of reasons. This is like a critical moment in the story as well, that she's saying, I'm leaving you. And here are the reasons why, and here is our history. That's a very dramatic moment. And that's a moment that you probably want to, describe and elaborate on and focus on as like a point of conflict and a point of tension in the story, but it is glossed over fairly quickly. And then afterwards, it's as if it never happened. Yeah. Because she says, I'm leaving you. And they continue arguing as if she never said that.
Yeah. And even well, maybe I prefer this version of womanhood doesn't strike me as a natural thing that someone would say. You'd be more likely to say, well, maybe I like myself this way or maybe I like it this way, and not in such formal terms. But yeah, I mean, I think that last little bit, and that I'm not going through the fucking open door treatment just because it suits men. Is it because it suits men? Is it because it suits your mum and Simon? Like, why are all men now being drawn into this? And I get it, right? I know why, because this is a social commentary piece. Yeah. But within the context of the story, why has her perception now expanded to all men? That hasn't really been set up.
And it's also her mother as well.
It's her mother too. And I get that obviously her mother's a pick me or whatever and, on their side. Like I completely get it. But I guess what I'm saying is that her reaction there is not really supported by what comes before. And while I can fill in those blanks for myself, It just doesn't fit within this narrative. Within this narrative, she would be saying to him, I'm not going to do it just because it suits you.
Yeah.
Not because it suits men. So just thinking through a little bit what your character would be thinking, what they would be feeling. Like it's really important to do that work of like putting yourself in that perspective so that you can create a natural reaction to whatever it is that's happening in the scene.
Yeah, and presumably there is a virus though.
Yeah, I would want the treatment for a virus that makes me a cranky bitch. Like that's why I'm getting HRT. But what I'm noticing here is that we're critiquing this and we're being, pretty harsh on Dez here. But what I want to point out is that we're very focused on the story.
Yeah.
So clearly we've been drawn into this story. And I think that is a strength of Dez. Like he has in all of his stories now, the ones that we've read, created this world very quickly, given us something to chew on, like something substantial. And we've got action and we've got things to think about, like this is all happening. And I think that's a real strength.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we can call out these maybe ways in which you might make your prose a bit stronger and all that sort of stuff, which of course we can all do all the time. But that knack for creating a story world is actually half the battle.
Yeah, and it's a great premise and a very interesting one, and one that draws on a lot of real world themes and experience that people are talking about and have had to put up with, obviously, the whole COVID-19 thing and pandemic and combining that with some concerns about the political climate at the moment as well. So all of that's thrown in there. So it's very recognisable and leverages, I guess, the zeitgeist at the moment. So the next line, better for who? I do indeed feel much better as a glass ashtray smashes against costly dental work. And it's very similar to the phone going in the toilet. And I would just, urge you, Des, there's these moments of high intensity and high drama that you seem to be shying away from and portraying things in a much more passive way. Like it's a glass ashtray smashing against costly dental work, which is a very abstract way of kind of describing a very violent situation. And certainly not the way that she would be describing it from a first-person perspective. She would be saying something like, it feels good to be smashing this ashtray against his smug face.
Yeah.
Like that would be her emotional energy coming into this, and it wouldn't be so detached. And it's those details like costly dental work that can be so effective when they are pointing to something that is specific about the characters. But bringing up costly dental work makes me think, well, is there something relevant about that dental work? Like, was there an argument in the past about how much they've had to pay for the costly dental work? And I don't think that connection is being made.
Or that it's an image thing. Which
he's
could be
self-obsessed.
super relevant, but again, it's not sort of set up by the story that precedes it. So while we can make that inference, it's not supported. I guess I come back to as well how extreme this behaviour is. Like this guy who you're living in a relationship with for a year, who shits you off and leaves shit stains, right? Okay, so he's annoying, right? But you have just smashed his face in.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
At that point, you cease to be relatable.
Yeah.
That is psychotic behaviour. And have no remorse, have no care whatsoever. Like, it doesn't even register that this is the guy who at some point you loved, must have loved. At least that's sort of what's implied here. And if not, why not? So to go from like, okay, I'm having sex with this guy and I'm a bit over him. And then he's sort of like, oh, come on, baby, like it's no big deal. And then you smash his face in and he's bleeding everywhere and he's pissing himself. Like, holy shit.
Yeah. And this is happening right after she's just finished herself off with her fingernails. You'd think she'd be a little bit more relaxed if this is how she's behaving now.
Maybe it's the fingernails that do
Maybe
it.
it's the fingernails. All right, so then we go into the end. She wakes up. It's bright. There's a handsome doctor there. And he reveals like the twist there that she was never infected with the virus and she's just a bitch.
She's just a bitch. I'm like, yep. Sounds about right. No, I loved that. That was actually really great. I think that was really fun. And look, I think what we've indicated is some of this other stuff that didn't quite connect with that sort of darker tone.
Yeah.
I think maybe keeping it lighter would have supported this twist as well. Like, because it is kind of funny. Like, turns out you're just a bitch. Like, to me, that's kind of like the whole point
Yeah.
of this. And we've sort of lost our way a little bit on this other real dramatic stuff where she becomes this sort of unlikable protagonist.
Yeah, if she hadn't thrown her phone into the toilet and thrown the ashtray at his face, then maybe we could have gone, oh,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Everyone else was just putting those characteristics onto her, but clearly there is something actually wrong with her.
No, she's perimenopausal. I mean, I think reading this as a perimenopausal woman, that is very funny to me. Like, I think that's great. And I think that is relatable. And I would have liked the whole story to be post single effect, like more pointing towards that message from the beginning, like setting that up, giving us little clues along the way so that when that twist comes, it's really paid off and it's funny.
So we end on that note. There's the revelation and they're all puzzled. And then there's this little scene break. And then there's like a couple of lines of commentary there to end it. 11 other women will be puzzle doctors that month, 49 the following, and 2,000 the next. But it's COVID-33 that will bring real change for women. So what do you think about that ending?
The very first time I read this story, I made the comment, I didn't love the jarring denouement.
Yeah.
That denouement didn't really, to me, add value. Like, it's sort of, I wasn't sure what we were getting at there because it kind of took us from that fun twist and that kind of, turns out she's just a bitch, like kind of point. And now it's presenting us with this future. And I didn't really get the COVID thing, like what's the real change for women? And I think there were quite a few authors who did that this round who were like, I want to set up an unknown right at the end. Like that's part of what I'm trying to do. And I think Dez was trying to do that here, set up an unknown because of that write what you know anti-prompt. But to me, it didn't really fit as a climax to this story. And I would have probably left it out, to be honest. Like I think leaving it at that previous line of we're all rather puzzled, like is kind of more in keeping with what's led up to that point.
Yeah, I think it would have been probably better just to focus in on that relationship a bit more and just kind of leave us with that on a impactful line. I don't necessarily hate this idea of having a little bit of extra commentary in that last line. But for me, this raised a few questions.
Yeah,
and that was the problem.
End.
So
that's kind of what I mean. Like this whole idea of COVID-33. Well, okay, well, what is that? Like,
yes, we found out that for her it wasn't actually a virus. It was just part of her personality, which is funny. And then 11 other women will puzzle doctors that month. Then 49 the following, and 2,000 the next. So are we finding that it is a different virus? Like, because that's an escalating number. It's not just the background number of people that feel that way. Or is that a response to some other social issue? So I'm not sure what is being implied there.
I mean, I get the point, right? The point is that we're showing that the world is changing and that this is just the start of something big. And I like that, but I think it did need to be paid off a little bit within the story, not leaving us with these lingering questions because we don't have enough information to fill in those blanks. So there's no satisfaction there. It's just like, hang on, what? Right at the end. And that's not the reaction you want. You want people to be like, right, yeah, I get it. This is what the future looks like and it's going to only get worse from here. But I think too, like we've set up this relationship right at the start with Simon and that's where we begin. And then Simon just disappears halfway through the story. Even though he supposedly like choked her out or whatever and put her in here, we never see him again. We don't see Mum again. We've just got this hot doctor, which, look, I'm not complaining about. But I think writing advice will often tell you the end needs to be in the beginning, right? So if the beginning features Simon and this relationship and they've been together a year and it's all going south, what do we get with the change by the end, or in this case, the revelation? How does that impact then her relationship with Simon, her relationship with her mother? And if it doesn't, then why have we been set up to sort of expect that?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, as you've said, we love the story.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we've discussed is struggling with like, who are these characters exactly and what are their intentions? So I think locking those in and really helping the reader latch onto the character and say, yeah, I get it. Get what this person's doing, get what that person's doing. I think that's really what you need to do to take the story to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, this certainly was on my maybe list for the long list, but I know in this competition, what differentiated, I guess, the long list from the stories that didn't quite make the long list was that sense of like, I've got a complete package here. I can latch onto that kind of thing. Whereas some stories like this where it had certain things going for it. So in this story's case, it had the idea, it had some fun banter, it had a cool twist, it had lots of cool stuff going for it. But as a complete package, it just didn't quite deliver that satisfaction. as a reading experience. And there's some examples we've given there about where it dropped away a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because I think that this story has a lot of potential. And I think that if you considered this like a first draft, for example, and then went on to make some substantial changes, you would probably find that you have a stronger story, because I think giving it that extra layer of thought about what the characters would really do in this situation helps you to solidify like your concept and deliver that more satisfying whole.
Yeah. I think like Simon's own package, he didn't quite get us off and we had to use our fingernails. All right, so let's just round off the discussion with the prompts. And we've spoken about the anti-prompt that comes from Dez's explanation, the whole idea of coercive control. Also the open door program being a treatment for women's hysteria. That was a great take. And then the word prompt is probably about as transparent as you can get. It's the word bring.
Yeah, and that was, apart from the word ring itself, the most used word. Yeah, and I think that's great. Like you've put a lot of thought and effort into those other two prompts. So it's appropriate to just let one fade into the background a little bit. It can be a bit too much at times if you try and force everything in there. I think probably a natural place for a ring would have been a wedding ring, for example, within that relationship, but it's not necessary.
No.
Like it really isn't needed. And I do feel like unless you're going to add something that's bringing value to the story, then just don't. And that's fine. Let the story be what it is.
So thanks, Des. We loved your story and we hope we weren't too hard on it.
I feel like we were a bit harsh, but I do think that when we get into the nitty-gritty like that, that's usually a sign of a good story, because it's like, look, let's really delve into those details of what can lift it. I think Des is developing a bit of a reputation for these kind of dark stories. He seems to have quite a strong connection to the mind of a woman, because, you know, every time I read one of Dez's stories, I just think, oh, he really gets me, you know. Yeah. So that's a strength and interesting choice for you to sort of take the women's perspective. But as always, you've delivered something fun. You've delivered something edgy. Like you haven't shied away from giving us like drama, which I love. Like there's so many stories that are light on the drama and light on the stakes. And I think here we did really get plenty of drama. And while we might critique how that's delivered, it's always welcome.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Des. And we'll be back in a week's time with our second Daredevil. And until then, ride on.
Ride on.
We hope you enjoyed this special Daredevil episode of Not Quite Right. If you have thoughts on this story, follow us on social media and join the conversation. And if you'd like to participate in the next round of the competition, head over to our website at notquiteright.com. That's WRITE.
Something doesn't seem